one's going to be left. Input one is left.
Like in another, they're back to back. Yeah. Right. Like, of course, we want to turn around, but if he has to prep for the next round.
Jared, I just need one input. Give me a 10. Give me a 10 count on like each one.
He wants to get it done now.
Mic one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, wait, hold on. No, that's right. That's fine. Mic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mic 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mic 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Mic 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3.
Perfect. You get your mix.
God damn it. We're in a parent's house.
Hello, there we go. Hey, welcome to the Creator Summit at Consensus 2022. I'm your host, Sterling Proffer, founder of CEOs. Thank you very much. Big fan in the front. CEOs works with creators to help them navigate the world of business and works with businesses to help them navigate the world of creators. And so we partnered with Consensus to put together today's programming, which we hope you enjoy. It's really designed first and foremost for creators, but we think that if you're an advisor, an executive, a brand builder, a founder, a community builder, an advocate, whatever role you play, we hope that you find this exciting and useful. A couple housekeeping things. We're going to do a couple sessions up here, and then we're going to go out to the breakout rooms, which are just over there. We're going to have 2 rounds of breakout rooms broken out into 3 rooms. One is designed for folks at the earlier stage of their career. The other is for folks a little bit later on in their career. The third one's focused on NFTs, and if we did a good job titling them, you'll know which is which. Second, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody involved in putting today together. First and foremost, the team at Consensus. An incredible amount of work, and I'm going to forget some names, but they are at minimum. Karen, Garrett, Sam, Brad, Michael, Stephanie, Holly, and others. So thank you to them. Thank you to all the moderators who have prepared really diligently for today's sessions, I hope. And to all the panelists who, of course, have come in from near and far. Third, what I want to do is I just want to leave you with a couple of thought starters that'll give you a bit of a flavor of what it is that we're discussing today. And let's see if we can pull up those slides. I have some diagrams to support, so there you go. So first is a picture that you've seen some version of on Twitter and, I don't know, posts on Mirror, at least somewhere, which is basically Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. The thing I want to bring your attention to is the thing on the right, which is who owns it and who controls it, right? Web 1, very decentralized, very open source, power to the people. Web 2, age of social media, the opposite of power to the people, very centralized, trillion-dollar companies emerge as a consequence. Web 3, is it power to the people again? It's kind of an open question, and I hope that we get to debate that a little bit today. So really, does Web 3 mean that the internet won again? Feels like a good thing to be able to say. Does it mean that the internet is winning? Perhaps. Does it mean that the internet might win all over again? That's definitely a possibility. And I think the only thing that you can say for certain is it's not clear that Web 3 is going to look anything like Web 2. So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that all of this is in a much larger context, that if you want to make the argument, dates all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, at a minimum dates to the beginning of Hollywood. Centralized power structures. If you're a creator and you don't plug into the system, get the hell out. Good luck. See you never. Then basically you could argue that the age of social media brought about the age of the individual. Let's call it the influencer, the world of me, but really what most importantly it was the first shot across the bow for the old guard saying it's time to wake up because things are going to be a little bit different. Now you could argue with Web 3 that we've entered the age of the collective, right? Collective ownership, collective decision-making, collective everything. And, you know, it's chaotic but good on the whole. The other tension here is between the hat that the creator wears, saying I'm actually going to create things, and then the 37 other hats that you need to wear now if you're a creator today. And the best quote that I found that sums this up is from a book called The Death of the Artist. It says, the good news is you can do it all yourself. The bad news is that you have to. It's a good book. The other thing, whether you're a creator or a corporation navigating the space, is just this sort of like tension between perception and reality. And building the FOMO machine, while at the same time you need to create a sort of enough runway for you to actually go and do the hard work of actually building what you're trying to do. It's a tough thing to do, and it's really tough when it looks like everybody around you is working 24/7 and tweeting from their Lambo, which they owned until recently. And so those are just a handful of things I want to leave you with. We're going to get right into the show. I'm really excited for everybody, and I'll see you a little bit later. So take care and welcome.
We're going to tokenize this talk as an NFT. I think we're going to put like a Berlin nightclub in the background, so it's going to be like super packed and crazy while it's all of us talking. So
I love that. GM. Everybody?
Hey, everybody.
G afternoon.
No, it's always GM.
Oh, okay,
there's
GM.
only GM. There's no other way. But wow. All right, let's get started. So this is about the new creative canvas and what Web3 is bringing, to crypto, to the art world, to finance, to tech, how these things are kind of coming together. I'm really excited to do this because up here with me are three of the probably best artists, but also community builders in the space. People who you wake up to and you go on Twitter and you see their work, but you also see their presence and their personality. Like, these are people that you get to know just by being on Twitter, whether you're a collector of their work or whether you're just hearing about them from others. Real like cream of the crop. So I kind of wanted to intro everybody. I'm Andrew Wang. Nice to meet you all. I am big into NFTs. I got in last year. I was working as a journalist for some national magazines, and I was like, this sucks. And I quit. I dropped out of school, emptied out my bank account to buy NFTs, which, in hindsight was a good decision, but I think you could also say it was a bad decision. Like, even though things turned out a little better, I don't know what I was thinking, because I knew like 1% of what I know now, which is like 10% of what I could know. But just to introduce the panelists, this is Sarah Bauman. She is an incredible Iranian-American artist. Yeah, there we go. We'd love to see it.
Thank you.
She's the creator of a really well-known NFT project called Women and Weapons. But I think more important is knowing her background. She was actually working at a hospital as an occupational therapist through COVID. And throughout that time, was painting, was creating art, and created a small collection that later on just exploded and grew into a much bigger 10K profile picture collection that's still building during this time. This is JN. It's like GN, GM, JN. There we go. So JN Silva is an artist as well, an incredible visual artist. I think you recently had a piece that's going to go up at Sotheby's, right?
Yeah, that's
kind of
correct.
fire. Besides that, I think to me you're one of the biggest community builders in the space. He's one of the co-founders of Animus, which is an artist collective that uplifts artists, shares information, gets people understanding what Web3 and NFTs are really about, does a lot of outreach, things like that. So really, really great guy. So that's JN. And then last but not least, we have Eric Friedenson, who will henceforth be known as F. which is his artist name. So F. welcome. F. is someone who is a very close friend of mine. We actually worked on an NFT project a couple months ago. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we were like, hey, let's put our heads together and think how NFTs can help and do good in some way. So we brought him on as an artist along with a couple dozen other artists. And we bootstrapped a project in 36 hours, got it out, raised over $1 million in 28 seconds, and got all that money out. And that's because this guy's art is insane. But besides that, he's based in New York, like me, real skater, real delinquent, but just an incredible artist as well. So that's your intros. And how I would love to get started is, I think a big question we ask in Web3 all the time is, how did you get in? What was your first NFT? What was your entry point? I actually want to kind of switch things up a little bit and ask, when was the moment where you knew you were in the right place? Because it could be when you were buying your first NFT or making it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So whether it is or isn't, Sarah, I'd love to hear from you first.
Yeah, so my story is a little bit crazy in that, we minted my 10-piece first Genesis Women and Weapons collection back in, August of last year, and Gary Vaynerchuk bought 3 of those pieces, and the rest of them sold out in 45 seconds. But I think prior to that, just, getting to know the community, getting to know the Web3 space, and recognizing how different the community was, and how amazing it is for artists, the fact that we can, you know, have that blockchain aspect where it's always tied back to us, and then also have the opportunity of gaining those royalties. For me, it was kind of a gut feeling. You know, there had been several other times where I wanted to maybe divert and try and figure out how could I, you know, get into art full time, and it just never felt like the right time. And delving into Web3, getting to know the community, seeing the possibilities that Web3 was offering me, I had a feeling in my gut that basically said, now is the time. And that's whenever I actually went down from full time at the hospital to a PRN status or a as needed status, and never really looked back from there. It just felt right. I knew it was right, and I just went for it.
Did it feel like you were breaking away from what you were supposed to be doing when you were jumping into Web3? No, it felt
Not at
natural.
all. Like, it felt like this was what was supposed to happen. Like, in my gut, like a lot of times, you know, I feel like you can feel things. Like, maybe it's not the right move. Maybe I have a little bit of gut hesitation. But for me, it was just like, no, this is the right thing. This is the right time. And like, this is the time to pursue your passions. And that's exactly what I did.
Well, there you go. JN.
Yeah, so for me, I think as soon as I had this like light bulb moment where I was like, wow, this is like the perfect intersection of art, tech, and finance. You know, I've always been like super obsessed with online communities. I was always kind of like an introverted person in real life, and I'll like age myself a little bit, but like I started like heavily using the internet in like 1998, and I found like my first online message board a year later. I was like, I downloaded Napster like the day it came out, and I was like on that, you know, chat the whole time, and I was just like obsessed with, you know, kind of like getting to know people online. So, you know, during the pandemic, that's when I kind of fully, you know, got into NFTs, you know, March of 2020. And I remember, you know, one of my very first NFTs was Ava Stars, and just like that sense of belonging and being a part of a community just kind of like changes the game, especially when you do it, you know, through NFTs. And, you know, besides that, you know, we formed Animus in the summer of 2020, and the first NFT we made was a collaboration with Badger DAO, and the NFT series went live on the meme platform. And, you know, once we, you know, I obviously bought our own NFT because it was the first NFT we ever made, so I was very proud of it. But that NFT actually got you a higher yield on their platform if you had it. So when I saw that utility of getting, you know, a higher yield by owning an NFT, I was like, oh wow, like you can actually, you know, these can serve a specific use case, and you can benefit from owning these pieces of art. And from there on, my brain just started racing, and I just started, you know, doing as much research as I could about, you know, not only the art, but like how you can use them to get utility by owning them. So that was like my moment, I would say like summer of 2020.
Yeah, so I feel like I have to ask, you know, you formed Animus in 2020, and I think a lot of us really started hearing more about NFTs in 2021. I would say summer of 2021 was like NFT summer, and everything was possible, and you felt amazing. And now here we are, but do you feel old? And are we still early?
It's wild for me because a lot of people consider me like an OG of NFTs, but like the people that I learned from were like, you know, Coin Artists and Lucio Paletti and Coldy, and those to me are like, you know, the true pioneers of the space. So I feel like I was learning from them for 2 years, and for me it was just kind of like I was hesitant to come into the space as mainly a photographer. I was very hesitant to mint, and all the platforms were telling me no, and that's when I kind of like formed kind of like that battle cry of like photography is an art form, and you need to let us in, and you need to like let photographers into all these platforms. And that was all of, you know, summer and fall of 2020. But now it feels like I've been doing this for a lot longer than a lot of people. So, you know, now I'm a little more conscious with like getting a balance to kind of balance that burnout feeling of having been in the space for almost, you know, 2.5, 3 years now.
Yeah, it makes sense. Evta, what was your moment?
Well, for me, I've been creating and designing things. I've always wanted to do that for my career, but it felt like for the first few years, I had to do whatever I could to keep creating and essentially make money so that I could keep creating. And those projects weren't the best fit for me. The clients weren't always a good fit for me, but I had to do it because I was too stubborn to get a job doing something else and keep that on the side. There was one project I was doing throughout 2020 that was in physical collectibles and art. And I started to see things popping up about NFTs and the overlaps between the physical collectibles world and physical art world and the digital art world. And I was just studying, learning, seeing all of these crazy artists pop up out of nowhere and become successful. And I felt like for me, I was trying for so long just to be able to do something sustainable that felt like me. So I saw NFTs as a way to do that. It kind of clicked for me around spring of 2021, where I felt like I could really do something super intentional. I wasn't seeing much art out there that looked like mine. I wasn't seeing much art out there that was good, in my opinion, either. And so wanting to come in and give a breath of fresh air to the space, I felt like I had a bit of an unfair advantage, knowing the collectibles market and having those years of art experience that it just intersects all the things I love about art. So, and then making it possible for the artist to do it because it becomes more of an easily tradable asset versus what I used to do, which is shipping my paintings and prints around the world. I still do that, but now I'm tying a digital asset to it as well.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about your story is that I think in Web3 you hear this very common story of somebody being like a struggling freelance artist, not getting a lot of work, and then jumping into NFTs and building a community, showing off their work in a new way and finding a lot more success. You also have artists who, you know, maybe had not done a lot of art before, who maybe worked in like vastly different jobs and was kind of like moonlighting as an artist. I mean, you've had some amazing collaborations in the past. Like, tell me if I'm making it up, but like Nike, Google, stop me when I say one, like big name that I just made up. Apple.
Well, I didn't collaborate with Apple,
was that
but
3 for 3?
I got on their website for an article, but
3 for
yeah,
3. 3 for
that was
3.
good. That was good.
But,
Thank you, man. Thank you.
you know, was that transition difficult for you? Or how did you look at NFTs and say, hey, I have this really cool work with these huge names, but I could push it further?
I just see that there's an opportunity for brands to come into the space and do something really awesome. I mean, we're all having fun in the NFTs. That's why we're here. We want to create, have fun, and build, and do something interesting that pushes the culture, pushes the technology forward, pushes art forward. And I think the brands want that too. So it's not switching or transitioning. It's, I guess, transitioning the approach of how I had that first conversation with the client to let them know about what I'm actually interested in doing versus maybe what they thought I would do based on what I did 2 years ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so like back to this idea of like a creative canvas, I was kind of imagining like physically what would that look like when we got the name of the talk. And to me, it kind of looks like this Triforce kind of triangle where you have, in Web3 you have art, but then you also have tech, and then you also have finance. I think a lot of people talk about NFTs in that way, like this is the intersection of art with finance and technology. Finance being things like higher volume projects, liquidity in art when we haven't really seen that before. On the tech side, we see things that are more like smart contracts, royalties baked into them. I would even put community under tech because I think the tech that we have enables a lot more of the social layer to form. I would love to hit on like this kind of Venn diagram between the three. So maybe if we start with art and technology, a question that I think about a lot with NFTs is like, you could basically put anything on the blockchain. Like, I have this hidden collection that nobody knows about where it's my feet pics on the blockchain. And like, if you have the link, you can see my feet pics. But maybe that doesn't leave this room. But you know, you could probably push it a lot further than just like snapping a picture of your feet and then putting it on the blockchain. So I'd love to ask, you know, going beyond feet pics, what does the art and tech component mean to you? Why do you choose NFTs instead of doing something else? Instead of just putting your work on Instagram and trying to get 1 million followers, or trying to go viral by making a TikTok, things like that, like very Web 2 things that we oftentimes compare Web 3 to. Why is the technology interesting to the art that you do?
I think for me, it's, you know, especially for artists, one, your artwork is now always traceable to you because it's on the blockchain, and blockchain allows for transparency. Part two, you get the royalty aspect of it, so that anytime that artwork sells, you're receiving a royalty from that. But also you can have your community be active participants in your brand and in your community. And like for Women in Weapons, for example, we have given full commercial IP rights to all of our holders. So all of our holders that own our NFT can now use that as their digital identity, their brand identity, however it is that they want, so that they can be a full participant in the community while also reaping, you know, whatever utility it is that we're putting out to them as well. So like you said, I mean, it's the intersection of tech, finance, and artwork where all the three are melding together, and it's opening up the door to a lot more opportunities in, in collaboration with our art. And I think that we still have a long way to go in regards to that as well. I mean, I think we've really just hit the tip of the iceberg on it, and I think that that's just going to continue to grow and compound in ways that right now we can't necessarily fathom, but I think that it's going to be something that's going to be pretty immaculate, especially bringing artwork into that fold.
One word you said that stuck out to me was utility, and I definitely want to get into it in a second, right after we hear from
Yeah,
Jan.
definitely.
Yeah, so for me, I think Web3 is just an incredibly powerful medium and tool for artists everywhere. I feel like a lot of artists were conditioned to kind of share and give away their work for free in Web2 standards. So, me as a photographer, I've been sharing my work online since I started taking photos, and it was kind of just a given that I would share it, particularly on a platform like Instagram. I have like over 2,000 posts on there, and all of those posts are, pieces that mean a lot to me, and I was just putting them out there almost daily. And the currency of Instagram is just likes, right? So as a creator, what I would do is, share a photo, hope that you get enough likes, and eventually build up a following, have maybe a brand contact me so I could do commercial work for them. And how that looks is, even at the best case scenario, which, I was a very successful commercial photographer for years, best case scenario is a brand approaches you, a big brand, like a Nike or a Spotify or Apple, and they want to work with you, you're very excited, then they rush you through this deadline of immense responsibility and work, you get it done, it's out there in the world, and then they're like, yeah, we'll pay you in like 90 to 120 days. That deadline comes, they're like, oh yeah, it's lost in like on our accounting, you have to contact them now, and it's like, well, you rushed me through this deadline and now you don't pay.
Yeah.
And even being a successful commercial photographer, I felt like I spent more time chasing down checks than actually trying to make new work, all while sharing my art on Instagram for free. And when it comes to my friends, my support was, giving them a like and sharing it so that maybe they too could get noticed and get a brand to contact them, right? Now with Web3, that kind of like upends and puts that whole concept on its head, because any of these pieces I can, mint on the blockchain and kind of like immortalize it on this decentralized ledger system, and have my name attached to it, have it traced back to me, and all you need is one big supporter to be interested in acquiring this piece, and that's it. It's an instant transaction, you get it, and now if that person ever wants to sell it, you get the royalties, and that's huge. And going back to what I was saying, for my friends, I can't tell you how many people I onboarded into the space, and friends who I wholeheartedly believe in, and they were mint their Genesis collection or Genesis piece, and I was like, oh yeah, I know you're amazing, I know you're gonna do great, I'm gonna support you, right? And whereas before I would have bought a print or a book that would have been sitting on my table, I don't even have enough room for prints or books anymore, I can buy their NFT, support them, and if they go on to do great things in their career, I can resell that work and kind of get benefit from being an early supporter of my friend's work, but also give them a cut, because it's baked into the royalties. So this kind of just like, gives validity to the concept of, all you need is 1,000 true supporters. Like I have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, and I've been sharing my work for free, and I spent 10 years doing that, and all I got was maybe a few commercial gigs. But now in Web3, all you need is 1,000 true supporters to really be able to live off your art, which I think is like incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like something I always ask myself is, would I rather have 1 million people who like me or 1,000 people who love me, who know me, who will stand by me, who collect my work, support me, will see this through with me long term? And it's a really interesting question that I don't think we have been asking a lot until recently. So it's fun for sure. F-Dot.
I feel like you guys covered so much in that. In the interest of time, maybe I'll just answer the first question as your next one so we can keep moving. What do you think?
Sure. I'll kind of like level this up a bit. So the shirt you're wearing says Optimist. I don't know if people can see it in the back, but if you really squint, it looks pretty good. And you would maybe think it was a streetwear brand or some sort of collab or whatever, but I think there's a really interesting story behind it. And the reason I want to bring it up is because Jan and Sarah were just talking about building community and really getting to know people that you work with, people who collect your work, that you bring value to, whether it's through the artwork itself or with utility and airdrops that you put on top of that art. So In 2014, you were in your apartment when you smelled something burning, and you realized that your apartment was on fire. And you ran out of your building and watched it become engulfed in flames. Right? I think a lot about how I'm in New York City sometimes, and I look out and I see smoke rising from like really far away, and I'm like, I wonder what's happening. But you were there, and you came back to your studio, and your artwork, you know, melted down, stuck together. The ceiling had fallen and caved in. But you went through the rubble, and you found a piece that you had been working on. And it was just that one piece of text, and it was burned and crisp at the edges, and it said optimist. And, you know, I always wonder, like, in Web3, how would you tell that story? You know, what do you think is important about the space now that allows somebody to see you as beyond somebody who's collaborated with big names like Nike, and to say, like, I really want to know F. I really want to know where he comes from and what he's been through to understand how he got here to create the art that he does. What goes through your mind when you think about, you know, that little pocket on your shirt?
It's a really good, thank you first of all for telling the story, and it's a really good question of what does being an optimist mean in 2022, especially amidst all of the downsides of Web3, like the scams, the bad actors in the space that are so prevalent, the projects that seem to come out of nowhere and shouldn't be successful but are, or whatever. And then you look at the one-of-one artists like me, like how do you stay optimistic? It's a daily struggle, true. You know, you wake up, and I'd like to say that I wake up and I'm optimistic every day, but it takes some mindset shifting and remembering where I started. And so back in 2014, when I found that artwork, it just reminded me of what I was thinking when I was making it, which is that I am an optimist. I can get through difficult things. And so, you know, everybody can when they channel that willpower and they see the light at the end of the tunnel, or they just hope that maybe the next time they try something, it's going to work. And that holding out that hope is what creates some of the most beautiful communities and projects that we see today, is just taking that risk on yourself. And it all seems pointless until it doesn't. But I hope that story, when I do share, I just share the facts of what happened with people and how it was kind of a sign for me when I found that artwork to keep going down that path of creating artwork that uplifts people, artwork that brings people together, regardless of the technology that's applied to it. That's my mission, that's my purpose.
And you know what's so fascinating about that is you hear a story that's so emotional and raw and real, but then if you take a step back, right? You know, we're at the CoinDesk conference, and NFTs are part of a market, and finance is involved in that. And I want to ask the three of you, you know, considering that your work is a part of this kind of new market, and there are a lot of variables to consider. For example, there's no doubt that we are in a pretty bad bear market right now. A lot of NFTs have gone down a bit. Various coins have gone down. And I wonder, like, the three of you are artists, right? You create. And in my mind, artists will create no matter what, because artists gotta art. But what do you consider in this moment, right? Do you have to switch up your strategy? If you're a trader, if you're an investor, you have to, right? You can't pretend things are the same as they were last year. But as an artist, are those considerations the same?
I think, you know, just like with any business, I think it's important to constantly be evolving. Evolving based off of what's going on in the cultural realm, in the environment, in the market, which is part of why for our Season 2 Women in Weapons drop, we are dropping 10,000, or airdropping 10,000 of our Season 2 NFTs directly to our Season 1 holders. But on top of that, we're also doing an open edition mint, which is, you know, it's not necessarily something novel. In fact, we saw Xcopy did it with, you know, editions of his pieces. But we're kind of making it our own by doing this open edition mint where it will be a one of X. So basically, every single one of these pieces minted, whether it be 1,000 or 100,000, will all still be different and unique. And what we feel is that, you know, this is going to kind of allow the market to drive the demand, just given the fact that we are in a very different climate and market than we were last year. And on top of that, we're wanting it to be very inclusive and attainable as well by minting at a 0.05 ETH, price, which is basically what we minted at last year as well. So I feel like it's kind of a testament to, we can't just continue doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's really important to constantly be evolving and be innovating and doing something new and unique. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to be losing a lot of our momentum.
Well said.
Yeah, so for me, I don't know, I feel like for a lot of artists, there's kind of like that cliche of the struggling artist, but I feel like it's true. And I feel like a lot of us made art for years out of just the love for art and the necessity. Like I never took photos with the intention of like, oh, I'm gonna make money. I did my photographs, I made my art just because I love doing it. So this is just, it's kind of like the noise, right? If anything, this bear market kind of like takes a lot of the noise and hype away, because during the bull market you're like, oh, if I'm not by my computer, I'm gonna miss the new mint and maybe miss out on like a lot of money. Whereas now things are a little quieter and you can really focus on like building and like you said, besides evolving, it's kind of like adapting to the what's going on in the space. But also for me personally, I feel like I have, as I said, such a deep connection to my collectors that in my mind it's like, all right, how can I generate liquidity and volume for all my previous collectors, and how can I reward them for having supported me during this bull market? So for example, what I did is I had a drop on Nifty Gateway last month, and I kind of just made it like a reward drop for all my collectors, and I made it all drawings, very accessible pricing only for the people that had collected my previous work. And I kind of like hyped it up as best I could, and that generated a lot of volume. And I had countless people saying thank you so much, like I was able to sell this and flip for some money, and I got some liquidity. So I feel like as artists, we're kind of just like conditioned to create through the good and the bad, and if anything, like out of the struggle, the best art comes from that. But besides that, it's just adapting to the market conditions, and I think education is huge for a lot of people that are just entering the space and like didn't take enough profits last year or didn't prepare for this bear market. I'm a little more seasoned than most, and I've been in crypto a little bit longer, so I've been through a few market cycles. So I kind of, whenever I feel like a genius, I feel like it's time to sell, and whenever I feel like everyone else is right, I feel like it's time to buy. So it's kind of balancing that out.
There you go, F. And then I have one more question.
Yeah. So for me, I've been working on my big collection of art. I haven't released it yet, and I don't think now's the time. I'm taking my time to build it right now. So that's my strategy, is just focus on my art and do some more accessible drops, just like you were saying, things for your past collectors. I did a very similar strategy on Nifty Gateway last month and put out some editions, some just for collectors, some for new collectors. And I love being able to have something accessible that's open right now, because now when I have real deep conversations with people who want to join my community or just really dig my art and my style, there's something for them, and it's not generated by hype. It's just because they like the art. I'm going to be able to build a really amazing community in this time, I think, before I do my big collection, which I can reward those people with. And now is the time for not only building projects but relationships.
That's really well said. I mean, when you're an artist, you can't create work every single day, but you can be in the community every single day doing something, getting to know people, telling them about why your work matters, why it matters in the larger context of things, hanging out, just talking art, like with Animus, right? Getting more people on board, telling them how to succeed in the space. So, you have like the moments, but then you also have the day-to-day. And for my last question, I kind of want to like take it back to thinking about this broadly as this creative canvas. If we threw a canvas on here and told everybody to paint, people would be coming at it from different places, right? Whether they care about different things or whether they're further along or less along. So 3 rapid fire questions for each of you. What advice would you give to somebody who's just getting into NFTs? What advice would you give to somebody who's been in NFTs for a while and is maybe seasoned, whether they've made it big or found their purpose in their calling, or whether they're kind of exhausted from being here for so long? And finally, what advice would you give to the person that you were before you came in? Sarah, you were an occupational therapist. JN was a high school teacher, right? Teaching a Shakespeare honors course, but also teaching students with special needs. FDOT was a skater and someone who traveled all throughout Latin America doing work. And I would just love to see you guys hit on those 3 things. So, new people, old people, and your younger self.
I think for new people, the best thing that I could say is to be unique, be yourself, make things that are a true reflection of your thoughts and yourself, because that's going to be what stands you apart. For people who are currently in the space, what I would want to say is, again, be unique, but also innovate. And what was the third one?
Your younger self.
Oh, my younger self. I think I would have told my younger self that, I was starting to get really frustrated that I was never going to be able to follow my passion. I would have told my younger self to just wait and listen to your gut. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, so I'll try to be quick. For anyone entering the space, I would encourage them to educate themselves on blockchain technology and security as best they can, because I hate it when someone gets really excited about Web3 technology and they get scammed, and kind of it's very disheartening. So the first thing I do is like make sure you learn about the security. For the seasoned veterans, I would say just like seek out a balanced life. Because it's easy to be tuned into the space at all the times, and for a lot of people that have been in it a long time now, they tell me they're super burnt out, and I'm like, just take your time to live life, and the art will come from there. And for my younger self, I would say just find your community and find the people that you can really connect with, because it took me a really long time to kind of like find my crowd, and I feel like that was my biggest hurdle. And two is just have more self-confidence in being yourself, because everyone has a unique story, and the more you share, the better it is.
I like that you mentioned security, because I was about to say everyone make sure you have a Ledger, but Ledger doesn't sponsor me yet, so like cut that. But like balls in your court. F-Dot, let's close it out.
So for new people coming into the NFT space, I would say pace yourself, do that research for sure. Find a community that you really vibe with and where you want to give value as well. And we forget how many talents and how many things we can do, because there was no way to offer that before. Now you can go into a Discord, just tell people what you do, and all of a sudden be helping out this community while they're also helping you. So for new people, like find that community that resonates with you and help them out. More experienced people in the NFT space, take the time to look at what's in your wallet and enjoy it, and remember why you bought it, and take a break. There's a big world out there outside of NFTs and Twitter, so that's my advice. And then for my younger self, I'd say lean into what makes you different, what makes you weird, like you were saying, Sarah, and just be confident, because it's like, my name's Eric Friedenson, but I go by F-Dot, and when I am an artist, when I step into those shoes, I consciously put on this jacket, this invisible jacket that allows me to be an artist. And I think that a lot more people, a lot of you, everyone here actually has the power to do that. And I wish I knew that when I was younger.
Let's give it up for the panelists.
Thank you so much.
Yay!
Thank you.
about 6 inches from your face, just like this. Point to your chin, project nice and loud because we're in a loud room and we want to hear you. That's basic.
Like this. Hello, hello, hello. This is a special show we're doing from Consensus about war crimes in Ukraine.
Yo, 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 A block, A block.
check 2. Hello. Check. Yeah, I know. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Check, great. Great gas speed.
Okay, got it. Just a little bit forward. I don't know if I messed up your
This is CoinDesk TV at Consensus Festival 2022, live from Austin, Texas, where the future of the global crypto economy is in focus. From newsmakers and market makers to tastemakers, we'll be talking with some of the biggest and most influential names in crypto, finance, Web3, NFTs, the metaverse, and more. Join us for live coverage and analysis of the biggest crypto news and culture happenings at the world's largest and longest running crypto festival. This is CoinDesk TV at Consensus 22, presented by Crypto.com.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is a special program that's coming to you from Consensus here in Austin, Texas. And it's a special program we're calling Ukraine, the War on Chain. And this is all about documenting war crimes evidence using blockchain technology. And we're very excited because we have a number of special guests today. This is obviously a very important topic. So I just want to note from the beginning that we're also actually recording this show and preserving it itself on a blockchain to kind of eat our own dog food here, and we want to store some eyewitness accounts that we'll get to in a minute in the second segment of the show, and preserve those on the blockchain and to kind of showcase the technology. So I'm joined here by a very special guest. This is Jonathan Doughton. He's the co-founder of Starling Lab. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Ben. Great to see you.
How are you doing? Good. So your team at Starling Lab is all about preserving evidence of war crimes on the blockchain. So talk about that. I mean, how did you get into this? How did you get started? And what is the problem that you're trying to solve here?
So I took up 4 years ago a fellowship at Stanford's Center for Blockchain Research and the Compression Forum at Stanford. And the idea was, could we use Web3 technologies to advance human rights? And knowing that this tech is really young, and we're just at the beginning of the re-architecting of the internet and creating all this new infrastructure, the question was, could we bring historians, journalists, and lawyers to the table to actually help write this roadmap together?
Right.
And so we have built, over the years, various prototypes working with Web3 technologies to figure out how can actually make a difference, and we learn by working in the field. So specifically with war crimes, which we'll talk about today, that's been about 2 years worth of work that started in Syria, where there was rampant crimes that were being committed of the kind of chemical weapons and various systematic attacks against civilians. And we started to take that documentation and put it on chain.
Right. So we were talking earlier and you were explaining about Syria, and you were saying this very interesting thing about how the problem was not the sort of volume of evidence that was available online. Actually, there are more hours of footage about the Syrian conflict on YouTube than there are actually hours of conflict in real life. So the problem isn't about volume, it's about verifiability. So talk about that and how you're trying to solve that problem.
I mean, I think anyone who uses the internet today understands that we're drowning in information, and that what has happened over the years, and it really got started in Syria, was that bad actors started to realize they could game the algorithms.
Right.
And they could flood the channel with misinformation, create doubt and confusion, and suddenly when you would see, in the case of Syria, very clear evidence of, let's say, a chemical weapons attack, it was already met with denials and these claims that this was a hoax. So suddenly seeing was not enough.
Right.
And we needed to think of new ways of trying to cut through all the misinformation and think about how we can rebuild trust in digital media,
right,
which is obviously no small task.
Right. We live in the age of fake information and fake news. So talk about the actual method that you've developed. That's about capturing that information, it's about storing that information, it's about verifying that information. So explain that process, please.
It's really as simple as you've described it. When you think about it, that's actually what we do in any process, whether you're a historian or journalist or lawyer.
Right.
You have to methodically go through these steps to make sure that as you're presenting information, it's around, right? Because especially in the case of war crimes, the adjudication of those takes decades, right? And so if something is, let's say, posted on Telegram or on Twitter today, it's clear, and you and I can see it if it's public, right. But what if, I don't know, I've heard these rumors that somebody might try to buy Twitter. Let's see, right? So what if that, as a company, no longer exists or changes its policies so that suddenly that tweet might be seen as a violation of the terms of service of that platform? Well, then now you have critical documentation which is taken down. And to give you a sense, Human Rights Watch estimates that about 20% of the key evidence that they cite in their own reports has already been taken down from places like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. Right. So entering into this conflict in Ukraine, we realized that The moment that you capture the information, let's register it so we know the first time that we've seen it, so we have a sense of what the original file is.
Right.
Then let's preserve it as fast as possible, and not just in one place, but potentially many places. And then finally, get that information in the hands of experts who can verify the contents, and then their attestations, their evaluations, that web of knowledge that forms to give you context, clarity, that too gets registered.
Right.
Web3 has solutions for each of these steps, and while the tools right now are at the protocol level and we're slowly building up the application layer, the reality is that we need to build bridges between that functionality and the human rights community, and that's precisely what we've been doing.
So maybe Web3 was about like creating tools that everyone can use. You can upload something to YouTube, but Web3 is about creating that kind of verifiable layer on top of it.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And something that you can now, if you're publishing on YouTube, it can be available for people to see, but we also have other ways to preserve it. So it's not stuck essentially with a single point of failure, right? YouTube takes it down, it's gone.
Right.
The Web3 and its architecture is actually a perfect solution for this because it's by its nature decentralized.
Right.
And the strength of Web3 protocols relies on the fact that it is as distributed as possible.
Right.
So in the case of war crimes evidence, you can imagine, what if you had evidence stored not just in one location, but potentially millions of places? And then if you could use cryptography, you can ensure that as you spread the information out, it retains its integrity, that it can't be modified. And that layer of authentication is actually critical to the design of even some of the earliest crypto protocols like Bitcoin.
Right.
And we're just simply now repurposing that layer of trust for things like war crimes documentation.
So, but when you're submitting evidence to the International Criminal Court, for instance, I mean, they must require an enormous level of kind of trust and verifiability. I mean, it's not just like me going on the internet and trusting something, or a journalist doing that. You know, can you talk about the kind of process by which you submit something to the ICC in that way?
Sure. So the ICC is one venue. I should note that in Ukraine, what is different about that conflict than, let's say, Syria, is that there's actually a functioning government. And we're going to have people on today who are representatives of that. And so there is an active war crimes prosecution effort within inside Ukraine itself. We're seeing some of the first pleas. So justice is moving quite fast locally. Then there's the international level like the ICC. And finally, there could potentially be a tribunal which sets up to go and look at the entire conflict, and similar to the way things worked in Bosnia, look at the long-range form of accountability in that way.
Okay.
In each of these cases, what we know is that these structures require collaboration with civil society. And the reason why is because they can't have investigators from any of these bodies on the scene immediately. First responders in the form of humanitarian actors that are providing aid or medical assistance are often the first people on the scene. Plus civilians are now, with their smartphones, documenting things. And you wake up every morning, and if you're on Telegram channels or on Twitter, you can see that there's just thousands and thousands of videos that are being posted. And so the step to basically move it from a camera of a smartphone all the way to a judicial proceeding requires a very careful way of establishing provenance. So you need to know where the information came from, who took the photo or the video, and then provide as much context around what was going on at the time. And if we can seal that knowledge at the very beginning and know clearly that this was the understanding and the facts as we know it on that time, then after that point, you just need to make sure that you're auditing what's called a chain of custody, so that as information is established, we know that it hasn't been tampered with. And there's a bunch of other things I can describe. You know, obviously, it's lawyers building institutions means it's inherently going to be complex. But I can say that what is problematic about this is that it's really striking at the heart of the problem with the internet of today, which is that social media networks, the very first thing they do when they take your content, they strip out all the metadata. They do it for security reasons, because they want to make sure that there's no malware that's embedded inside a photo or video. But what that does is immediately it removes critical information that we need for something to be admissible or to have weight within court proceedings. And so we are building back into the process ways of establishing just basic facts: time, date, location, and then getting more and more complex to build this web of knowledge.
Okay, so we wanted to show everybody some of your methods today, and you very kindly produced a package for us, a video package, and some of your investigators were out in Ukraine this very weekend. So we're going to go to the package now, and with your explanatory voiceover of that. Thank you.
The devastation in Kharkiv is plain to see. Across the city, attacks on civilian infrastructure has been widespread and systematic. To bolster our investigations, our partners at Hala Systems deployed teams to visit 3 schools that were attacked in early March, and then again just this past Saturday. We equipped them with special apps that use cryptography to help us seal the authenticity of images in the camera. This establishes a cryptographic chain of custody from the field to the delivery of photos to war crimes prosecutors. As a university lab, our focus on the intentional destruction of schools meant so much to us. We're determined to bring state-of-the-art tools to investigate these crimes against children, which are under-investigated and under-prosecuted in courts worldwide. We use apps like Proof Mode, which allows us to lock pixels of the images, as well as the metadata, such as the time and the date and location of the image. Using Signal, we then send the information with end-to-end encryption back to our headquarters, where we register and preserve the information on the decentralized web. These tools give us a transparent and enduring proof of the integrity of these files. And although the wheels of justice turn slowly, with new technologies, we can preserve information so that when justice comes, we can have confidence that the evidence will withstand the test of time.
So first of all, thanks so much for producing that video. It's amazing, and your voiceover was great. Talk a little bit more about those protocols that you're using when that investigator is collecting that information on his phone.
So what you saw in the video was a process where we're creating a photographic chain of custody. So you have an investigator on the scene taking a photo with a phone. And if you saw there in the clip, there was a step where he pressed the button to create a cryptographic proof, which is establishing a root of trust on that phone to say, this was the photo taken at this time and place. What we're doing from that point, from the device, is pushing things out to a registration of that information, the metadata, on an L1 protocol. Not actually just one, multiple protocols. And in the same way that we know, for instance, that a transaction, let's say like a Bitcoin transaction, can exchange between you and I, and that ledger is fixed, and I can't change the fact that I've, let's say, given you 100 Bitcoin. That immutability of that process is what we've used to establish first the idea that this metadata is now registered and cannot be changed. Then we also enrich the metadata by saying things like, well, we can turn to protocols even like Bitcoin to establish time and date as an independent authority so that we know that for sure this appeared on chain at this time relative to the Bitcoin ledger blocks being added. Now, that's registration. From there, we're starting to use cryptographic utilities. Now, those utilities are probably the latest part of the innovation that's going on with Web3. And what essentially it is that the crypto utilities are infrastructure like storage. And they're using cryptography to spread out as far as wide as possible information, in this case, videos, photos, and then using cryptographic proofs to audit every 24 hours the availability of that information and making sure that it hasn't changed. So you register, and then you preserve the information. And I think that right now, and then the final step. As we try to form more knowledge around an object, and we need to share a photo and video with experts, we need to establish a process where I check out the information to you as an investigator, and it's similar to the log that someone would keep at an evidence locker. And we use NFTs for that process because we can establish basically a custodial NFT for the archivist that's maintaining the information, and then access NFTs to you, let's say as an investigator who's doing, let's say, a forensic analyst, you could receive the token and we can establish that that information was given to you in that way. And in some ways, this is remarkable because we're taking information that was otherwise used for financial transactions or creating crazy markets around Bored Apes.
Bored Apes, I was going to say.
So, but really what this means is, if you think about it, that those use cases right now, which have captured all the headlines, I think that although they're powerful and illustrative of a lot of the financial opportunity, what is going down much deeper into the stack is an understanding that for something like in Bored Ape, that you need a way of using technology to create a digital original. And then making sure that as that gets transferred between individuals, we can track that information in a fair way. Bored Apes use it to generate value in a marketplace. In our case, it's being used to ensure that investigators really have now a chain of evidence and understanding of who's seen what when. So by the time that a judge needs to evaluate all of this, she can look at this and say, okay, I have a full picture of how all this digital information moved around.
Right. Well, that's a great example of how NFT is a real foundational technology. It's not just a kind of speculative thing around JPEG. So that's very interesting.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Jonathan. We're going to wrap up this first segment now, and coming up in the second segment, we're going to be hearing from a couple of real-life Ukrainians who will give eyewitness accounts from their experience in Ukraine from the conflict. So we're going to take a break and stay tuned. Or I can sit in the middle. Well, yeah. Okay. Okay, we're back here, and thanks for joining us. We're here.
This is CoinDesk TV at Consensus 22, presented by Crypto.com.
Okay, we're back here at Consensus with our special show about using the blockchain to document war crimes, and we're joined by two Ukrainians who very glad to have you here. Thanks very much for being here. Alex Bornikov is Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Digital Transformation. He's responsible for many of the policies of crypto and blockchain in that country. And Pavel Kravchenko, he is the founder of Distributed Labs, is that right? And he's a consultant to many companies on blockchain activities. So we want to hear about your experience from Ukraine in the last few months after the invasion by Russia on February the 24th. So Pavel, talk about your experience. How has it been for you and your family?
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear like fighter jets during the night. And I personally saw the explosion from my apartment somewhere in Kyiv city center. And yeah, first week was really stressful because you don't know what will happen. So basically, Russia did first move, offered some conditions, and yeah, waited for the surrender. Then surrender was not an option for Ukrainians, and then next day they did something more. Again, conditions, and that's how it went. And after first week, okay, we were more or less calmed down because we knew there's options are limited. So that was the first week, was super stressful. Yeah.
Alex?
Well, I had a kind of similar experience. I also woke up from explosions on the day of invasion, and I spent 2 days, almost 2 days in Kyiv, like following all this news when Russia were advancing, and then was the decision to evacuate, to restore the operation of the ministry. Some were safe, and those are tough times, and we had a lot of stress during those days. It took 3 days to relocate, being on the road, hearing all this news, like they were advancing. So this is really tough times. And then we trying to keep up with completely new tasks that we set ahead of us as a ministry, and eventually I came back to Kyiv. I'm still there, and there are still sirens, and sometimes they fire rockets, and sometimes they hit. But Kyiv is trying to live a normal life. Like for recent like months and a half. So more and more people coming back, but there's still a high probability that they can evade one more time, and you're under instant pressure of like a ballistic rocket could hit any spot in Kiev, so you have to be really careful and spend some time in bomb shelter. So that's our life now.
Yep. It's terrific. It's hard for us to really understand. We're sitting here in these very cozy surroundings here in Austin, and we can't imagine really what you're going through. So you were saying, Pavel, that you had actual employees who were involved in the conflict, and they've been under stress. I mean, what is that like to deal with as an employer? I mean, how do you deal with that?
You know, like a couple of people, 2 people actually went to the army. And at least 2 fathers of other employees went also to the army. We support them. Most of our team members were from Kharkiv, so basically it's a war on front lines. As a company, and a few were volunteers, like full-time volunteers, we just support them like nothing changed for them. Obviously, they are all warriors now to a certain extent. Yeah, generally, we try to make people being more or less together. So we have a couple of, like 3 houses where people live and work. And work was not affected much, like wasn't affected.
Right.
So we had opportunity to support army with the revenues and yeah, everything.
Right. So Alex, do you see Ukraine being a leader in blockchain and crypto because of the need for this kind of verifiability of evidence and other use cases like that?
Well, it certainly has a lot of potential, and even according to chain analysis, we're in one of the top 5 countries on crypto adoption index. So a lot of people familiar with crypto. A lot of businesses like Distributed Lab and other companies have offices and they still have a lot of employees working on blockchain projects. I wouldn't say, though, that Ukrainian government uses blockchain. So we had some attempts to use it, like it was pilot projects to run it to see how it works. But actually, war interrupted us in the middle of some very interesting projects about that. So most of this work is postponed right now, we have those plans, but we obviously can't make it in full speed until the war is over. But still, I think we have one of the most powerful blockchain communities in the world. It's totally private, but this crypto fund that we started once the war began, and this enormous support of over $60 million were donated. It's indicator of how Ukraine is advanced and how many people is actually from crypto community involved in this.
Okay. So we were talking the other day about Jonathan's work in documenting and verifying information, and you were actually a little bit skeptical, I think, Pavel, of some of that work, because you were saying, how can you tell whether something is a war crime just by looking at a photograph, even if you know that it was a photograph taken on a certain day at a certain time? So just sort of embellish that a little bit, elaborate a bit on that. Why are you skeptical a little bit of this?
No, I wasn't skeptical. It's just you need to define. So when you collect evidence, obviously it should be like 100% proof. Otherwise, the court might be neglect other evidences. So I guess the best way to collect that is satellite. Whatever information about where the rocket came from, I think it's already happening through intelligence agencies. Obviously, when you see tanks, we have lots of videos of that. Tanks are bombing houses. That's easy to tell. I think this is the first war in the world where we have so many content. Everybody has a smartphone. Recording, so it's definitely making job easier. When there is some ruined building, you don't know. You need to be careful with that.
Right. So maybe Jonathan, you can talk to that a little bit. Talk about the importance of context in the context of this evidence that you're offering.
Right, so humans are always, they have to be kept in the loop. And what these technologies can do is ensure that if you as a forensic investigator look at a photo today, in 10 years from now, if this needs to be brought forward in a court case, we can ensure that all of that information is locked in. And as we continue over time to get more and more information to build an understanding and to come out of the fog of war and to understand what actually happened on a certain date and time, all of those attestations can be registered again and again and again so that we know actually how our knowledge of the event has evolved. And that's really important. Those are basics. I would say that right now, the opportunity in Ukraine, and I think what we see in the international criminal law community, is that there's a moment of transformation here. This is an inflection point. I often hear when I speak to my Ukrainian friends, they talk about not about rebuilding Ukraine, but about reimagining Ukraine. And I see it much the same way here, is that we actually can reimagine how we think about collecting evidence and storing it for the long haul. And that is something that requires both humans and technology to work together to build that process.
Right. Maybe that's a good point as well. I mean, you can't just rely on technology to do its work. You need that kind of buy-in from the community. Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up this segment now, and coming up in the next segment, we're going to be hearing from Marta Belcher, who is the chair of the Filecoin Foundation, and she is largely responsible for providing some of the infrastructure that we're using for this documentary process. So stay tuned for the next segment.
This is CoinDesk TV at Consensus Festival 2022, live from Austin, Texas.
Go. Hi, welcome back to Consensus and our special show about Ukraine and documenting war crimes using blockchain technology and other Web3 tech. So we're joined here by Marta Belcher, who is the chair of the Filecoin Foundation, and she has been instrumental in providing some of the infrastructure for this documentary process. And we're very glad to have you here. Thank you, Marta. So talk about your work at Filecoin, and what is your role there?
Sure, absolutely. So I serve as the chair and president of the Filecoin Foundation, and we have been so lucky to be able to work with Jonathan and the Starling Lab to preserve so many different testimonies of genocide survivors on the Filecoin network to make sure that they get preserved into the future. And we're so excited to be working with him on this really important work he's doing in Ukraine to make sure that this evidence of war crimes is also being preserved for the future.
Right. So you're actually a lawyer yourself, right? So you understand some of this process behind preserving this evidence.
Absolutely, yes. I also serve, in addition to being at the Filecoin Foundation, I also serve as the general counsel and head of policy at Protocol Labs. And so I'm a lawyer by training and also a civil liberties lawyer specifically.
Right.
And so I really do understand how important it is to make sure that this technology is able to be used to actually authenticate and not just preserve this evidence, but actually to authenticate it and make it so that it is able to be used as evidence in the future.
Right. So we've been talking about war crimes today, but there's sort of some larger issues here about misinformation in general. I mean, we've come to create an internet that we can't really trust. So how can Web3 improve our sort of sense of trustlessness or our trustworthiness in the internet in the future? Can it really solve those problems, do you think?
You know, I really do think it can. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's so amazing about this technology, is really having the ability to remove the trust aspect, right? And I think we live in a world where you really can imagine so many different ways that things can be questioned, right? I mean, in the digital world, how do you know what's real and what's not? And I think that's where our technology plays such a huge role. I also think our technology plays a really important role in just making sure that the things that are true survive into the future, right? Which is something that is I think we sort of take for granted. We kind of think when we're using centralized services, like, okay, you know, we feel the sense of security that our data is going to be preserved. But I don't think that sense of security is actually merited, right? I mean, just to give you one example, we have repeatedly seen centralized services like Amazon go down, right? AWS go down, and vast swaths of the web will go down for hours, including websites that are huge contributors to the economy. And, you know, people's toasters will stop working, right? And so, you know, I think you can really see why it really is quite tenuous, and the problem with these single points of failure, and why it's so important to have the ability to preserve information using decentralized systems where you don't have those single points of failure.
So Alex, I want to talk to you about the misinformation war in Ukraine. So you've got the kind of physical war, you've got the kind of cyber war, and then you've got this kind of information war. Talk about some of the lies that are coming across from Russia and how that impacts the conflict.
If you're asking about what they lie about, or
the propaganda that's coming from Russia.
Well, I think they're the top narratives that they're pushing they started from, this is just I don't know, it's not a war, it's a special operation. But in fact it's a full-scale war. And their most disgusting narrative that I hear, that Ukrainians are like fascists, and there's a lot of Nazis, like almost everyone is a Nazi here in Ukraine, which is completely like insane, and it's not true. And this way they create this hate, this opposition, like we're Russians, we are above all, and we're fighting for the right cause because there's a Nazis there. And under this narrative, they're pushing a lot of like TV and website news on the websites, and trying to twist I don't know, news, pictures, videos. Like if they see, like for example, they show Ukrainian military with tattoos, and if he has tattoos, it means he's just Nazi. That's all. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter what the tattoo about. And this is amazing how they create and trying to spread massively those narratives. So when you talk to regular Russian, they convince that even Ukrainian children deserve to die because of this. So they completely like twisted the minds of their own people. And it's important to, I think, and I believe, and we take this seriously, to fight this, to show what's really going on, and show, first of all, that we're a peaceful nation. We never intended to, I don't know, start this war. It's actually, by the way, it's another false narrative and the lie that we supposed to invade them first. So they did this because they had strong evidences that we just in a couple days we're going to just invade them, which is also complete nonsense. And we identify, well, first I can disclose a lot of this nuances of how we fight with this, because for this reason, for the security reason, but we take this seriously, and we trying to fight every aspect of their lives.
Can you give us some idea of how you fight back?
Well, again, I can speak just in general terms, but I can tell that there's a special task force assigned for that. First of all, they analyze all their narratives that they're pushing, trying to find a common denominator under all of those messages. Then we, after analyzing this, we we looking for the real facts and making like opposite, like what's really going on, and spreading to different channels. Mostly it's internet channels, because all the federal like TV coverage, it's just government in Russia, so you can't have access. But we still have a lot of access through messengers, through different social platforms, and we're actively using them to show what's really going on to the Western world, of course, and to the Russian as well.
Right. Pavel, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's. I think Ukrainian community in general did a big job of documenting like things. So it's not just like, obviously like governments are like pursue their own goals. But what was new in that war, that every person who was living in a city was filming and documenting something. So, and we together in a decentralized way documented lots of things, and obviously like lots of Ukrainians who lived in Europe or US or traveled, and you don't have to trust to a single government official or channel, but you rather trust the person you know. And obviously many people visited Ukraine and know that there is a peaceful nation and it's like very friendly to foreigners. There was never a problem if you speak Russian or like whatever. So I think we collectively did that. And remain in a peaceful nation, we fight that accusations. Yeah.
Jonathan, could we talk about the kind of wider sort of applicability of the techniques and the technology that you're developing? I mean, for instance, we have some tribunals now about the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C. I mean, could your technology be used in that context too, do you think?
So the work is really just beginning at this point. I think that what is fascinating is that the techniques that are being explored right now in this very difficult moment for Ukraine have actually far-reaching implications, where we could see this being used in countries all over the world. And not just for war crimes, this could even amount to things that are going on with everyday crime. I think that what the table stakes here, though, and it's very important even as we're sitting here in this moment in something like consensus, is that we need to make sure that we don't get carried away with the possibilities of this technology, and that we keep ethics and the approach here very balanced with the opportunity. I think when we look back at the Arab Spring, which was really one of the first wars that was documented on social media, there was this naive view at the beginning that, well, social media would solve everything. It would topple dictators. And then very quickly, we saw that maybe that was the first chapter, but the next chapter was ISIS, as an example, recruiting terrorists, optimizing campaigns of terror for YouTube, gruesome attacks of the kind that led to the information warfare that you've been talking about. Well, what now with Web3? We're at this moment where there's a tremendous amount of optimism and possibility. Yes, we need to seize that. At the same time, we all need to think about the next steps and the next steps beyond that, so that we can build a more balanced approach to this, and that we don't crush ourselves with this optimism, but instead stay very sober. And we owe that to the people of Ukraine as we're trying to help. We owe that to the courts that are looking to us for guidance. And I think that's, if there's a common thread among all the people that are working in the community, the international rights community, is that they understand that. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes of Web 2. We have this moment with a powerful new technology to maybe actually do the right thing, be sober and clear and prepared, because the problems will emerge. There's no question about it, and we have to be ready.
So Martin, maybe you can talk to that as well. I mean, how do we get this kind of technology that's quite niche and quite specialized at the moment and get it out there into the kind of wider web and it becomes more mainstream, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that the work that Jonathan is doing is absolutely critical. I mean, I think a lot of these were really just ideas not very long ago. And it's actually incredible how far we've gone in such a short amount of time, how much Jonathan's been able to do in such a short amount of time, to go from these sort of audacious, frankly, ideas to actually putting them into practice, to being in a place where we actually are using the decentralized web to preserve evidence of war crimes, to preserve evidence of genocide, right? I mean, this is just absolutely incredible. And Jonathan's work at the Starling Lab has been absolutely critical to making this into a reality.
Right. Okay. So I think we're going to wrap up now, and thanks very much for the panelists for coming on. It was fantastic. So Jonathan's going to be appearing on our Big Ideas stage on Friday, giving a little TED-type talk, outlining some of his ideas on this topic, which is well worth a listen and a watch. He's also written an op-ed for us that you can look for on Coindesk.com, and we're going to be writing up an article where we're going to be including the hash of this show in that article. So it's kind of bumper coverage this time. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for coming on, and we really hope this technology helps in a small way to deal with this project. It's just a little bit. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you.
Ben. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.